The top 100 agents are the best of the best, listing and selling more than any other agent in Australia.
Sold. Congratulations, sir. Well bought.
These are the practices, actions and beliefs of the most successful agents in Australian real estate. Raw, honest and completely uncut. Welcome to REB's Secrets of the Top 100 Agents.
Well, g'day everyone, it's Liam Garman here, editor of Real Estate Business, back today with another episode of the Secrets of the Top 100 Agents Real Estate Business podcast. And today I'm joined by a gentleman who doesn't need much introduction. Last year, he and I had a few emails back and forth after I saw him speak at the Rise Initiative up here in Sydney, and he did a fantastic talk with Leanne Pilkington about his background running an agency. And I reached out to him afterwards and we wrote a fantastic piece. Do go back and do read it. Failure wasn't an option, the leadership lessons for business survival. And he's on the podcast by popular demand because I know a lot of principals, directors, licensees, agents up and down the country are learning a lot from this gentleman. I'm talking about the one and the only Michael Nitschke, all the way in Adelaide. Michael, welcome to the podcast, mate. How you going?
Mate, I'm really good. And Liam, thank you for that incredible introduction. I'll do my best to live up to it in the podcast today. But no, it's a pleasure to be here and really excited to have a chat.
Now, I was looking through your website just before we hopped online, and it seems like you're dabbling in a few different areas at the moment. You still have your agency, your office, which I'll get you to introduce in a second, but you've also gone into the mentoring, coaching area. Talk to us about all of your ventures at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so multifaceted is probably a good way to describe it. But yeah, I'm proud to be the leader of Nitschke Real Estate. So we're an independent real estate agency in the Adelaide Hills in South Australia. We were just chatting off camera. A lot of people would know the little town of Harndorf. We're about 5 minutes from there in Mount Barker, and our business in 2026, it's our 26th year in business, which is a great achievement for any small business. I know a lot of principals watching this know that it's very much one day at a time when you're leading a business, so very proud to be here. I've been in the industry now for about 18 years, so pretty much my whole working life, and my role as leader of Nitschke Real Estate, I was thrust into leadership quite suddenly in 2018 after the loss of my father, David. I was made the sole director of the business, and at that time, which we can go into, of course, in our podcast today, but didn't get the handover that a lot of people would expect to get to transition into leadership. It was very sudden. And I didn't realize at the time, but the business was in a lot of trouble. We had just 6 weeks of cash left, millions of dollars in debt, and a team suddenly looking at me for answers that I didn't have. And, I guess if we fast forward from 2018 to present day, the business is now an independent agency, profitable, growing steadily, great team, great impact in our community. And I guess where, for me, the mentoring and coaching comes into it is just that opportunity to give back to the industry and to help other leaders that are perhaps facing difficult circumstances in their business, or just looking at ways that they can turn things around and make something great happen.
And that's where I think good leaders are separated from those who are competent managers, I guess. The real test of leadership doesn't come from when your agency is doing really well, when you've got an abundance of listings, when the property market's hot. And I think that there's going to be a lot of people around Australia that have experienced pretty bumper years just off the back of house price rises, which has led to higher GCI. But what really makes a leader is having it thrust upon you at a time which is a challenge. As you highlighted, you had 6 weeks of cash left. Talk to us, what were some of the decisions you made in those first few weeks, and how did you piece together this not only emotionally taxing time, but then the chaos behind the scenes? How did you pull all those threads together and make the agency profitable again?
Yeah, look, the quick answer is I worked my butt off. Like I hustled incredibly hard. But the reality is, look, my world was crazy at that time. I mean, outside of the business, I again, chatting off camera, as you know, I've got a young family that are a bit older now, but at the time, my two daughters, Peyton and Harper, were both under the age of 3. So we were already dealing with, like sleepless nights and juggling the kids, but then now juggling a business that, for me, so my late mother and father started the business, as I said, 26 years ago. And they separated a short time after they started the business. But, for me, in that moment when I was thrust into it, it really represented one of the very last things that were left from my family. So I felt an enormous obligation to try and make something of it. But the advice around me very much was that, just take an acquisition deal. Why are you doing this? You haven't created this mess. Sell the rent roll, sell the assets and start again or do something else. But there was a part of me in that moment that just thought, if there's a way that we could figure this out, if I could come up with a way to map a path forward and to slowly but surely get through it, what an incredible story it would be on the other side. And, would inspire others to do the same, obviously save everyone's jobs in the business, but also build on the legacy that the business already had. And so I just thought, this might actually be my only chance to run a business. I might be here for a specific reason, and so let's have a crack. Let's try and work it out. So, at that moment, and just for some bigger context for people, sadly, my father, who passed away from bowel cancer, he was sick. He was given 18 months to live, and he pushed that diagnosis out with a lot of treatment and fighting very, very hard for 3 years. So it was a long battle. And he was so resilient in his fight against that illness. But where that resilience came in terms of his treatment, he was really just had his guard up for people around him to the point where he wouldn't let people know just how sick he was. I was working as a salesperson in the business at that time, and I remember constantly asking Dad, what's our plan here? Let's plan for the worst and hope for the best. I obviously don't want to lose you, but we've got to do something because the business was eroding around us. And he just refused to talk about it, wouldn't put a plan in place. And it was literally just in that last week of his life that he put me on as a director. And I didn't even know what it meant to be a director. I just saw it as an opportunity to lead. And so I straight away jumped on. And it was only a few days after that I was able to see the financials. And it was at that moment that I saw how much trouble we were in. And before I could ask Dad what this meant and what the plan was, he died. And I was suddenly faced with all of it.
Looking at the weeks after that, obviously, and you highlighted something which, for a lot of sales agents out there that have the aspirations, the goals to have their own business, you highlighted something which is you're now a director at that point. It means you have those liabilities, you have those responsibilities that you have to now step up into. You've got no other choice. You have to fill that role. In the immediate weeks, throughout those really hard times, I know you had to make some pretty hard decisions yourself. How did you, what were some of those early moves that led to your ultimate success, your ultimate triumph, and being able to turn the business around and save that family legacy like you highlighted?
Yeah, look, there was a lot of tough decisions that had to be made. I think the most important decision that I made, though, which is really important for listeners to understand, is I asked for help straight away. So I looked at what mentors and resources were available to me at that time, and I had a bit of a skills audit, I guess, of what were my strengths and what were my massive gaps. So I knew how to sell real estate, and as a result could generate revenue. But I knew that whilst I felt I had a natural instinct to lead, I definitely needed some coaching in that space. So I reached out to, with some research, the incredible Tanja, who was my coach at that point, to just help me with just some strategies and things that I could implement to bring the team together. Because over that 2 to 3 year period where Dad was fighting his diagnosis and going through treatment, there really wasn't much leadership at all in the business. So it was a very fragmented business. And then we also had, there was a finance manager in the business at the time that was really, a consultant as such, helping the business through. And I was able to reach out to her for understanding, how does a profit and loss work? What's a balance sheet? How do we do payroll? Like all of those sort of basics. And then I I just I looked at all the problems that were in front of me, and I just was really careful not to trigger all of them at once. We needed to generate revenue quickly, but we also needed cash. So one of the things that myself and my two siblings did is we lent money into the business to buy a bit more time, because obviously 6 weeks in an overdraft wasn't long enough to be able to, we needed a longer tail. And then we just made sure that the decisions we were making with the money we were spending were the best that we could. And so we looked at, obviously, the P&L, looked at where we were spending money, and identified very quickly, unfortunately, there's some tough decisions to be made with some staff members straight away that were not performing. And so within the first weeks of my leadership, I was letting people go, and I'd never done that before, but I had to. And then flowing on from there, we had a second office, which was great from an ego point of view. But if the business isn't making money, you've got to let go to grow. You've got to step back. And so with that decision, for listeners, we're very competitive in real estate. We've all got competitors in our local town. I actually had to assign the lease. The best tenant for this second office to assign that lease was actually one of my biggest competitors. And so I had to do a deal. So that hurt the ego, as you could imagine. But again, it was about making the right decision. It's a mantra that we've adopted at Nitschke that works really well for us, which is better before bigger. Just understanding that, growth comes from an outcome of being better at everything we do day to day. It's not just chasing growth for growth's sake. So really managing the ego that I think really plagues our industry, and just making sure that you're making the right decision in that moment. So for us, it was around, really just honing in on our head office location in Mount Barker, where we still are today, and getting the best out of our people and doing the best we can in the market.
And there's already a few huge management leadership lessons that you learned in the immediate aftermath of it. And it reminds me of Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership. Now, I always hold myself back a little bit when I refer to that book, because sometimes the rah style of hustle doesn't necessarily work for everyone. But one of the leadership lessons that you highlighted takes me back to that book, the prioritize and execute, which is not tackling every issue at once. You made it sequential. You addressed issues by its hierarchy, by its importance, and moved down, as opposed to trying to do everything at once. And we know when people try and do everything at once, you have that level of analysis paralysis, you get caught up. There's so many different ways you could take this, but there's data out there which, it can take up to an hour to get back into flow state. So if you're trying to address every problem at once, it's more often than not that you don't address any at all. And the second big thing that I took away from what you were saying was ego, which I think is very, unfortunately, very prevalent in the real estate industry. And it would have been really hard for you to sign that lease to your competitors, but ultimately by taking that hit to your ego, or not even, but maybe leaving your ego at the door, it actually gave you the fundamentals from which you could rebuild the business. So where's the business now? I know you're quite in demand, and you've managed to really take back that footing in the following years.
Yeah, the business is in a great place now. And one of the lessons for me in the last 12 months that I've learned is that I really actually understood what got me through the initial turning around of the business wasn't going to get us to where we want to go, which is what we call our Everest mission. So our vision for the business is to be the leading agency in our area and have 1,200 properties under management, and be in a position where we're selling 300 properties a year. And in our marketplace, that's a great position to be in. I know some principals in different markets are different sizes around the country, but certainly a lot bigger and better than where we were. But what I realized, the lesson for me was that I jumped on the tools and did everything I could. I tried to, obviously I was selling like mad during that period. I was super hands-on trying to turn every aspect of the business around. And what I realized is that I was really burnt out once we got through that and burnout can hit you in lots of different ways. Some people, it's really obvious when they're burnt out, and others, like me, I'm someone that has a very big tank, so I can just keep going, as things hit me. But I just realized that if I looked inside me, I was actually empty. I just didn't have another gear to get to. And I thought, I can't just keep selling as much as I was and expect us to hit, the potential of the business. And so for me now, we've just had our best sales year ever. And I've sold 25% less properties that year to achieve that outcome. And it's through obviously letting go with the team and building other agents up within our team. It's a funny dynamic, when you've been a leading salesperson for so long and you're so used to building your database, growing your numbers, that you're literally actively trying to do less and less each month. But understanding that for me, the more time that I can free up to work on my business, the better the outcomes will be. And that's the journey we're on now. So, my goal for the year ahead is to sell no more than 20 properties, but still for Nitschke to sell 140. So, for me, then it's about what can the team do to step into the gap and obviously continue to grow.
And that's where that ego aspect comes in again, that you don't necessarily need to be doing those tasks if you can get other experts that you're working with to do it on your behalf, which gives you the ability to generate and achieve that long-term vision of the 300 properties a year. Earlier in the podcast, I've been reflecting on it. Maybe I was a little bit dismissive when I said a lot of agencies have been doing very well because rising house prices, quite a hot property market, GCI has been going up more often than not, which might have been a bit dismissive because we have seen that there are a lot of markets out there where listings actually are quite tight. Listings in some markets are falling. I did a podcast just last week where we're talking about listings almost being at an all-time low in Perth, just a huge supply crunch. But at the same time, so many people attracted to the industry because they perceive that it is an opportunity for high incomes. So there would be a lot of agencies out there, there would be a lot of offices out there that are really fighting at the moment, that are really struggling at the moment. And maybe a lot of people across Australia that might find themselves in terms of that succession planning in a very similar place that you were. What are some lessons that you could share from this journey to people that might be going through that at the moment? Maybe some things that you did right, some things that you did wrong, that they can take on board as they look to rebuild.
Definitely. And I've no doubt that would be the case for business owners around the country right now. One of the best things you can do is discover or really pinpoint what is the operating system that you want to run your business with. So the operating system that we use, which works really, really well for us, is EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. There's a great book called Traction, which is a really good read. I'm not endorsed by the author or anything. I'm just passionate about the story, and it's a great initial introduction to that. I had a mentor of mine in the industry that introduced me to EOS, and what it's all about is just having a framework and rhythms around your organization to run it effectively. You touched on it before, Liam, that pinpointing all of your issues and challenges that you've got in front of you. I think one of the best things that leaders can do is improve their decision making. And it's really hard because if you're in a role as a CEO or the visionary of your business, as they call it in EOS, you're never going to have a shortage of ideas. Like I'm constantly on, with big picture thinking, things we could do. And every idea in the moment feels like a great idea. And you've got to be really careful about that and really got to make sure that you're completing what you start as well. So by having an operating system in place, so for us, we've got that 10-year vision for the business that I shared with you, our Everest mission. And we break that down into, okay, what's our 3-year vision against that? And then what's our 1-year annual plan? And then breaking down within that annual plan, what are our quarterly, it's called rocks, what are our quarterly rocks that we feel will pull us as far up that mountain that we can go over a 3-month period. And then having meeting rhythms in your business where meetings no longer become a waste of time like they are in a lot of businesses around the country. We've all been in meetings that could have easily been a Teams message or an email. But in our business, quite genuinely, we look forward to meetings because we have a really simple agenda where we start with some good news. We talk about an update on those rocks for the 90-day goals that we've got, and then action items from the previous meeting. And then we spend the back half of the meeting solving issues. So we have an issues list system that we run in the business where we log every single issue as we find it. I think we've got over 220 at last count this morning issues on that issues list. And that can be everything from big thinking, big goals, marketing plans, recruitment opportunities, right down to, are we ready for a new coffee machine in the upstairs kitchen? But all of it matters. It's just making sure that you log it and then start to make the right decision to progress your business and move it forward.
And ultimately, that system allows people to have their own buy-in, not necessarily from an equity stake, but from the position that they feel that their concerns are being addressed, that they're emotionally part of the business, they're emotionally part of the day-to-day. And that's something that I've learned throughout my own leadership as well, which is everyone has to identify those problems, because as an employee, you can't complain if things aren't being fixed, if you're not raising them. And I think the classic example is always IT issues. Everyone's always got a broken computer, and that at some point you might have an assistant agent or someone in an operations team saying, well, I can't do that because my subscription for this is run out, or this isn't working. Well, how long hasn't it been working? Oh, a couple of months. Well, this is something that we could have addressed a few months ago. It's about the proactivity to make sure that you can have business as usual, and that you don't have a sum of 1%ers, where if it's a 1% of a subscription, 1% of a printer not working, those things can sum up and really undermine the day-to-day basics and profitability of a company. Now, with those rocks, Michael, I'd love to get some insight. How low does it go in the business? Not low might not be the right term. How many people in the business? Is it just yourself and some of the other top agents or some of the other partners, or is it right the way through the business that everyone takes part in it?
Everyone takes part in it, definitely. Look, so the size of our business, we've got a headcount of 20, including me and 2 team members offshore, so 18 onshore. And we've got a leadership team. So we've got myself, general manager, Sarah, and then head of property management, Maddie, who is my sister, that's part of that leadership group. And then we're working actively. One of the priorities for us as an organisation is then, identifying leadership talent within the rest of the team to start to then obviously grow those layers to flow through. But everyone needs to understand what the rocks are and understand the role that they can play and the reason why it's important to actually complete them. Why are we setting this goal? And it connects actually to what you were saying before about an IT issue is a really good example where one of the art of running an effective issues list system is that it's actually identifying what is the real issue. So sometimes it can feel like the real issue is that, this app isn't working or my emails aren't working. But the real issue could actually be, have we got the right IT provider? Or it could be a step further. Are we actually inducting our team properly? Are we doing the right checklists pre-induction to make sure that we're ready to go when Liam, the bright new team member, is about to join us? Have we got everything ready to go? And again, I get why it is, because business is really hard, really, really hard. And you've got, as a leader, you've got a million decisions coming at you all the time, and there is always something to do. Like it never stops. It's one of the reasons why I love it, but it's a gift and a curse, where it's very hard to find that space for clear thinking. But that's where having a process or a method where issues are raised and reviewed are really important. It's more important than actually solving them, is making sure you're solving the right issue, and having a system where you're able to see all your issues and group them, and you can actually start to see themes, and that actually helps you with setting your rock. So, for us, for example, we had in recent times, we had a number of issues relating to routine inspections in our property management team, and we're able to group them all together, and then as a leadership team work through and understand that, hey, there's actually the bigger issue is our process just isn't clear enough for how we run routine inspections. So let's make that a priority across the quarter. Let's get team buy-in, because clearly the team straight away are interested in it because they're raising these issues. And then let's put a plan together to solve it. And I think probably the other learning that I'll just add too is that if listeners are anything like me, where you've got all these ideas and you're running 100 miles an hour, one of the best skills that you can learn is to fall back on your instinct to just solve everything quickly. Because if you solve issues too quickly, you may not have you need to spend most of your time actually understanding what the real problem is, rather than just go, well, that's easy, I'll fix it. Or in fact, even just saying, I'll fix it, that's one of the biggest problems, because then you end up being this key person that's just the Swiss Army knife that fixes all the problems in the business, and you're not going to reach your potential.
And that is fantastic insight about not understanding the underlying issues behind something. If you just dive in with the solution straight away, if you're not taking stock of what's causing it, then it's going to be an issue. If you take the IT example, it's going to just pop up again and again and again, right? And it's just going to be a great inefficiency and ball and chain on your business. I'd love to get some leadership insights and advice from yourself, Michael. Given the challenges, given your natural talents as a leader, coming through this, we're seeing a little bit of a change in the modern workplace, especially with the role of a leader. And I think it is a good thing that a lot of managers across the country are taking a little bit more time to understand what leadership style they have, given their strengths and weaknesses, how they can effectively manage their teams in accordance with their psychological profiles. Throughout this time, it would have been very challenging for you from an emotional perspective. How do you balance that openness as a leader, that showing vulnerability as a leader, versus making the tough decisions, sometimes having to revert to that autocratic leadership style, letting people go because you're looking at the P&L and it's a tough decision that has to be made. How do you go about balancing them in a real estate office?
So I think as a leader, it's really important that you set the standards for your organization in terms of essentially your way of being, what you want the impact to be in the marketplace, but also how you want your team to treat each other. And you must be consistent within yourself to living up to those standards. I've seen it firsthand in the business prior to my leadership, where there were different standards for different people. Certain agents could act a particular way. Higher performing agents were allowed to treat operations and admin staff like, which is not okay. You've got to make sure that you're very clear on who you are and who you want to be as an organization. So setting your values and being ruthless in running the business to those values, recruiting people that match those values, and then behavior must be consistent with them. And if it isn't, a great saying that Tanja shared with me really early in my time with her is that, the standards that you walk past are the standards that you accept. So, a little thing can be a big thing. If you observe something that isn't quite right, I had an example yesterday with a team member that won't be named, obviously, on the podcast, but we've got a standard.
They will be listening to this. So.
Yeah, of course they will, definitely. But I had a conversation that I happened to walk past with some team members around a new listing that they had, and we've got a standard in our business, which seems like an obvious one, but is that you must see your properties before you book photos or introduce a buyer, just purely because you just need to make sure that, particularly sometimes there can be a temptation, it's a block of land, who cares, just book the photos, get it online. But Murphy's Law is undefeated. You just don't know. There could be a neighbour's car parked in the driveway. There could be an issue with a fence. You just don't know. So go and check it out. And, I overheard a conversation where it was basically that, no, we'll just stuff it. We'll just get the photographer out there and then they can let us know if there's an issue. So, it's that conversation in that moment. I could have walked away. I've got a million other things that I'm dealing with. But, I just sort of said, hey, guys, I'm not so sure that's how we do things, is it? And they said, no, good point. We better do the right thing. So I think it's just making sure that you're consistent with that standard and you're clear on what that is. And then, it becomes easier when you're managing to a standard rather than a person. So I can, from day one, I had no choice. I suppose I could have done it a different way, but in my mind, I had no choice but to be vulnerable. Like, I've been working in the business for, at that time, it was 12 years when I became the leader, and the whole team knew that I'd never run a business before. So, I couldn't stand up in front of them and go, hey guys, don't worry, I've got all the answers, let's get on with it. I had to let them know that obviously I was clear on what I knew, and what I didn't know I was going to find out. And it created a safe space for the team, obviously, to contribute and share things that were troubling them, and we could start to improve the business. But so I've always carried that vulnerable approach all the way through. But then when you're managing to a standard, then, you can have a conversation with someone and say, look, even though you get along really well with Liam as a person, if the standard's dropped, you can speak to Liam about the standard that, hey, Liam, are you clear on how we do listing presentations here? Because I just noticed that you didn't follow that step the other day. And can you tell me a bit more why that is? And if it's clarity around the standard, we talk through it. If it's a training issue, we can work through that as well. But obviously, if it's a situation where, Liam, the hypothetical Nitschke employee, is just against operating to our standard, well then, in my opinion, the performance management conversation is pretty straightforward to say, well, look, we're not flexible on the standard, Liam, so we need to probably talk about what we're going to do next. So, it's understanding that, being clear with people is actually being kind. I guess for me, because of circumstances in my life, I've had to have some really difficult conversations with people at younger ages and at times where it was very intense to go through. But I guess I've learned that skill that it's better to just say the bad news, be clear about what's going on, in this case, manage to a standard and then move forward.
But you said something fantastic, which I've long thought about, which is those hard conversations, those courageous conversations, more often than not, actually are a kindness, and that could be a young agent that doesn't know that they're not doing a particularly good job. That's a young agent that doesn't know their strengths and weaknesses. So by you identifying that with them earlier on, rather than before they go down that kind of performance planning pathway where they're, in their 3 strikes potentially, or before they make a catastrophic mistake which might see a real estate license taken away or never being in the industry again. You are doing them kindness by catching that early and having what is a very hard conversation. And that ruthless adherence to values, I do find that quite funny, because you seem like a very nice, good, supportive workplace. And we're going to enforce that we're here. We're going to enforce that we're looking after each other. And especially in the world of real estate, when you come in, perhaps, that vulnerability is a reliance on that democratic style of leadership, which is, I acknowledge, hey, I'm really strong in these areas. There are probably going to be licensees, and I think it's very fair to say most licensees up and down the country are probably quite good with sales, but from a property management side, it's forgotten or overlooked. So what you would do is you would democratize it to a subject matter expert in property management that can feed into you. And with that knowledge, with that expert advice, you can you'll have the situational awareness to execute your strategy, to do what's best for the business. But by allowing those subject matter experts to feed into you as a leader, and by not cutting them off, by being open with them, you will have all parts of the business running in a strong tandem. Now, we've been talking a lot about strategy today, Michael, and one thing that I want to do is see, just to wrap up the podcast, what your goals are for 2026. We're now in 2026, I was about to say 2025. What your goals are for the year ahead, and in the ROC framework, how are we going to do them?
I love that. Love talking about goals. I'll talk about goals anytime. So yeah, I'm excited for the year ahead. And look, I think for us at Nitschke, it's definitely continuing with our Everest mission as always. But I touched on the number of sales we're looking to achieve from a property management point of view. We've actually gone through. It's interesting, our industry, again, we're so obsessed as a real estate industry around growth and, awards and, the highest number of X and Y. You've got to be really careful of this. I think it was Rachel Atkins from Harcourts recently saw a great comment from her around, having 1,000 properties under management is great, but it depends on who's in that rent roll, right? Like if you've got landlords that are not in accordance with your values as a business and they're treating your property managers like shit and just not treating them like they're just a resource, not a human being. That's not okay. This industry is really hard as it is. No one needs to withstand abuse and those sorts of things. So we, as well as obviously compliance with properties too. So I know talking about compliance in the context of goals is not very sexy, but it is very important. So for us, we've gone through a review of our rent roll, and we've actually taken a fairly large step backwards, which was in terms of handing some properties back that were causing a lot of problems for our property managers, as well as just landlords that didn't fit who we were. And then now, obviously, replacing them is incredibly important. So for us, we want to increase our rent roll to around about that 450 mark would be great for the year ahead, to set us on that path to the 1200. And but for me, I mentioned before, like personally, I don't want to sell more than 20. I want to be available for my team to coach and mentor and support them. I'm really enjoying keynote speaking and being in a position to do a little bit of that. So I've had a couple of opportunities that I booked in already for the year, which I'm really grateful for. So continuing down that path is what I'm excited to do. And you touched on as well about, coaching and the services that I offer. I've, basically looking at doing some one-to-one coaching with leaders that, want to just unlock what's blocking them, bounce off someone that is in the industry with them. As I said, across this podcast, I haven't arrived, like we said, we're right in the thick of it. We've got issues every day that we're trying to solve and progress as a business. But I think it's going to be a great year if all of those things can happen. But most importantly, to have a balanced lifestyle with my children, with my lovely wife of nearly 12 years, I should say, in 2 weeks' time, Kat. So just having that healthy balance between being a business leader and being a healthy, happy person outside of work.
Now, to all of our listeners, make sure you get in touch with Michael. I know he's going to his website. He's got all of his services listed there, and make sure you reach out to get some fantastic insights, because I can almost guarantee that if you're running a business at the moment, there's not too many problems that you're facing that he hasn't faced already or hasn't worked with intimately across his network. But Michael, I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Been a pleasure, Liam. Thanks for the opportunity. And it's been a great chat.
That was Michael Nitschke. Make sure you reach out to him via his website. And that is all we have time for today on the Real Estate Business Podcast. But until next time, bye-bye.